It's hard to imagine the internet without user accounts. Most web apps and services nowadays have some form of user authentication and content protection in place. It might even be a cornerstone of the business that you're trying to get off the ground. So let's learn how to build it. In this video, we'll learn what is the Auth panel and what can you do with it. Then we'll learn how to add user accounts to your web app. And finally, we'll cover how to protect content inside your app. With Wized, you have a lot of options when it comes to authentication. You can build a simple login with email and password by using Airtable as your backend, or you can build a more complex system using Firebase on the backend and letting users log in with Facebook, with Google, etc. Another important component of Auth is content protection. You can choose with Wized whether you want to protect an element, a request, or if you want to protect whole pages. Now that we know what Auth is and what you can do with it, it's time to build a more practical example. In this case, we're going to use Firebase on the backend and Wized with Webflow on the front end to build our app. A fun fact is that Wized was actually built on Firebase, so you have access to the same backend infrastructure as we do. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. So the first thing you need to do is create a free Firebase account. Once we have this ready, we can go and create a first project. So you can name your project anything you want. In this case, I'm just going to call it my example project. Okay, continue. I'm not going to enable analytics because in my case, I don't need it. And that's it. Now we just have to wait for Firebase to do its thing. All right, the project is ready. We can continue. And now we're in the console. So here we're going to go to Build, Authentication, Get Started. And here I'm going to select simple email and password. I'm going to enable that, and I'm not going to enable Magic Link for now. Now you have all of the other options available to you as well. So if you wanted to add another sign-in provider, you can do that. The next thing we have to do is go to our project settings. And here we need to create a new app. So I'm simply going to click on this icon over here. Here, I'm going to call it my web app. And I'm going to register the app. And here we can copy our API key, our app ID, and we'll need our project ID. So let's head over to Wized and let's add Firebase to my apps. Once we're in Wized, we're going to go to My Apps and click on the Add button. Here, we're going to call it Firebase. Under Apps, I'm going to select Firebase, and here I'm going to add my project ID, my app ID, and finally my API key. Once that's ready, I'm going to hit Save. Now, if we head over to the authentication panel, we can start building our first authentication requests. So first, we have to select our authentication provider, and that's Firebase. Now, the first request we have to set up is the create user request, because if we don't have any users created, we can't log them in or load them. So let's start with that. I'm going to hit the plus sign over here, and this is going to automatically create a request for me. It has all of the values filled out. The only thing I have to do here is bind these email and password fields. Let's head over to the sign up page, and here I'm going to set up these fields. So I already have an email field. I added Wized elements earlier in Webflow, so I can simply bind this field now. So first I'm going to click here under General, Input Fields, and here I have Sign Up Email. And under Password, I'm going to bind the password field, so Sign Up Password. As for now, we can save this request, but later we're going to get back to it. So let's hit save for now, and now we have to add the action to the sign up button. So what we want to happen is that when a user clicks that button, a request gets performed. So we're going to call this sign user up. And here, I'm going to apply it to the sign up button. Sign up submit. And under configuration, I'm going to create an on-click request. And when the button gets clicked, we're going to perform our create user request. And that's it. Now let's head back to our create user request. And here we have to select what happens after the request has been executed. So first, let's run this request and let's see what happens. We can see here that a user has been created and we have all of these fields that we can use inside of our app. Now we see also here we have this request states over here, and with these states we're going to build some logic. So let's go to after request and let's click on add. So we're going to navigate to the home page, but only if the request was successful. So under conditional we're going to click yes because we have a condition. All right, let's build the condition. So we can see here we get all of these fields about the user, but the only thing we care about is this state over here. So we want to make sure that the user was created successfully. Now status code 200, that means that the request was a successful one. So we're going to click on that, and here we're going to write status code, this variable over here needs to equal 200, just in our example. So we're going to write equals 200. Now you might be thinking, okay, why do we have this equals? Well, that's just the JavaScript way of saying, make sure that these two values are exactly correct. So that this is a number and that it's the right number. So in this case, it needs to be 200. If the status code returns anything else except 200, the condition will be false and the user will not be redirected to this page. So only if the request is successful is the user going to get redirected to the home page. All right, let's hit save. Now that we created our request, let's hit refresh and update our canvas. This will ensure that the action is applied to that button. So here, I'm going to write another email now, and we're going to create another user with a new email. And if this is successful, if we configured everything correctly, I should get redirected to the home page as soon as I hit sign up. And there we go. This is how we configure the create user request. Now let's move to the other requests. We need to also log in the user, we need to load the user, and we also need to set up logout. So let's go with login first. Login is very similar to create user. So we're going to choose here under Firebase authentication, sign in user, that's already pre-filled for us, and now we have to bind these fields. Now this is very similar. So we have another form for login, and we have login email, and here we have login password. Now I can hit save. And let's actually go to that page and let's set up the action the same way we did before. And here we want to apply an action to this button as well. So we're going to go to actions, and here I'm going to call it log user in. I'm going to apply it to the login button, and under configuration, I'm going to set it to onClick, perform request, login user. And I'm going to hit save. Now, if we refresh the canvas, that should be applied. All right, let's go back to our request and set up the redirect. So we're going to go to login user, and here under after request, we're going to set action, navigate to homepage as well. And again, we want to create a conditional. So we want to make sure that the user was successfully logged in before we can send him to the homepage. So in this case, we're going to do almost the same thing we did before. It's just that we'll look at our second request. So in this case, it's this login user request, and we're going to go to status code, again, equals 200. Now if we hit save and we refresh our canvas, we should be able to log in with one of the accounts we created previously. So let's try that out. And there we go, we successfully logged in. Now let's build our next request, and that's load user. With the load user request, there's not much we need to configure. We can see here that if we run this request, we get all of the information about the user. Now, the only thing we have to do here is set up a trigger. Under trigger, we're going to select on page load, and we want to load the user on every page where there is a logout button, because if there is a logout button, that means it's a content protected page. All right, so let's go to logout here. Okay, and that's basically it. Now, if we go to any page that's requiring the user to be logged in, we can see that our request is getting executed. Here, if we open the load user request, we can see that we have our user. Okay, awesome. Now you might be thinking, okay, but these pages are still not protected. Anyone can drop on them. And you're right. We have to still do some more things in the Auth panel. So here, under access control rules, we're going to set up our access control rules. So first, we want to do that again on every page that has the logout button. And under condition, we're going to create our condition. So if that condition evaluates to false, we're going to send the user back to the login page. In this case, it's account login. So account login. Now let's configure the condition. So we're going to open this data field over here, and we're gonna build this in a similar way like we did before. So what we wanna do here is we wanna check whether the request is currently executing and if the execution was successful. Otherwise, we wanna send the user to a login page. So if load user fails for some reason, we wanna send the user to the login page. So let's expand this panel and let's go to the states below here. So the first thing we said is we want to check if the request is currently being executed. If that's the case, we want to leave the user on the page because we need to wait for that response. So this is our first condition. And then the second condition is going to be or. This is a sign for or. We have that in our cheat sheet, so you can always look that up. And here we're going to write if has requested is true. So if the request has finished, and then we're going to check also if it was successful. So if status code 200, so status code 200 means that the request was successful. We're going to write equals 200, just like before. So what this condition is going to do is it's going to check whether the request is currently being executed. If yes, the user is going to stay on the page. And then once the request finishes, if it was a successful request, the user is going to be on the page. If the request has executed, but the user is not supposed to be logged in, they're going to be redirected to the login page. All right, so let's hit save now. All right, now that we have that in place, we only need to add a logout request. And we're going to apply that on our logout button. So here, we're going to select logout user. We're going to click that plus sign. And here, after a logout request, we want to send the user to the sign-in page. Or was it login? Login. All right. Okay, and now if we hit save and we refresh our canvas, we should have all of the functionality in place. So currently I'm logged in. We can see here that load user is active and that we get all of this information about the user. And now if I click on log out, I should get kicked out. Oh, of course not. I didn't add a logout action. So we have to go to actions and we have to create a new action. Here I'm going to call it log user out. And here we're going to apply this to our logout button. Under configuration, we're going to set on click, perform request, logout. All right, and we're going to hit save. If I refresh my canvas now, it should be working as planned. So let's hit logout and let's see what happens. And there we go. And now if I try to get to any other page, I should get kicked out immediately. So let's open job details. And I get kicked out. If I hit sign in, I should get redirected to the dashboard and I should be able to visit all of the pages. In this video, we barely scratched the surface of Auth. There's so much more that we can do with this panel. We can cover certain elements while requests are being executed. We can customize the look and feel of the page based on user fields, and we can even create membership tiers for our users. But in order to learn that, there are first some concepts that we have to learn. We have to master logic and conditionals, which we're going to cover in our next video. Thanks for watching and see you soon.